being on camera and having to say something that is transcendent is a tough thing for the ego to deal with, because the ego wants to say something important, but it also knows that there's absolutely nothing that it can contribute to anything that can't be described, can only be experienced in order to be known. So what do we do as the ego? We admit that we don't know. But at the same time, we know that we have experienced time to time for a long enough period of time to know that transcendent experiences occur for us. So why are we here? What are we doing? What's the purpose of our doing this? It's so that we can access higher states of consciousness. It's so that we can know within our experience of ourself, in our normal state of consciousness, within our interactions with our friends and family and friends, businesses.
Business associates.
Business associates, why not? How do we awaken within our normal activities? How do we awaken in our interactions with others? Because we haven't all the way. Occasionally, to some degree. What is it that we're afraid of if we surrendered totally? Well, we're afraid partially that we'd no longer be in control of anything. And to control things badly is more comfortable than to have something surprisingly synchronistic, but potentially, from the point of view of the ego, destructive. So how do we become real here? If you say you want to be self-realized, what does that mean? That means becoming real, becoming authentic, becoming true, coming through true and clear and clean. So who you are in the present is admittedly cloudy and foggy, or as the quote goes, seen through a glass darkly. How do you clear that up? Well, as always, you ask the question, how do you clear that up? And you allow the truth of that, the answer that will clear that up for you, to come from wherever the source of the truth of that answer is. You don't put any restrictions on the truth. You don't decide who it can come from and who it can't come from. It can come to you from a likely source or an unlikely one. It can come from you, it can even come from a completely unidentifiable source. So long as the result is a transcendent quantum shift of clarity, of consciousness, of awareness, of knowledge, of wisdom. So you ask the question, how can I be here in a self-realized self-actualized state of knowing. Well, you have to step out of the way. You're not in charge. You being the ego, you being the identity, you being the consciousness that believes that you're the man or the woman, the human. You're the one that doesn't know. You're the one that wants to know, needs to know. And since you've admitted that you don't, and that you can't, and that you're trapped, you ask for help. And you don't know who can help you. You don't know what can help you. But what you do know is something can. Because it's enlightened you in the past. You know that there is such a thing as an awakening. So if you've awakened once, or twice, or many times, and in this moment you're still unaware, you surrender again. You admit that you don't know, and in admitting that you don't know, there's no other pathway other than to surrender to that which does know, and you can't remember what that is. You have an idea that it's the truth of you, and so that it's really you, but your experience of yourself is not the experience of the truth of you, and you can't get a handle on what that is. So you just have to give up. You ask, you relax, you expect to receive the answer, and then you notice that the answer is knocking on the door of your awareness. It hits your unconsciousness as soon as you ask. Now, because it's begun to transform your experience of who you are, it enters into your consciousness. And at that point, you have to choose to open more. Choose to receive more. Choose to understand more. And you allow the answer to have the transforming causative power of shifting your experience of who you are. So who are you, really? What creates a transcendent experience here on earth? What moved a man like Michelangelo to create in such a way that he's famous worldwide 500 years after he lived? Well, he chose something to focus on that freed him. He chose to focus on the embodiment of the divine. If you look at his creations, you have gods, you have prophets, you have the perfection of humanity glowing with the light of divine inspiration. You have Jesus, you have Mary, you have Moses, you have David, and you have the various prophets. Then you have the pagan sibyls and oracles. Everyone an example of an awakened consciousness or a divine presence. So he focused his life's efforts on creating the physical image in stone and in paint of a body that's the temple of God consciousness. A body that's self-realized in eternal truth for itself. Now, for an artist to do that, it's kind of expected. An artist is expected to have insights. An artist is expected to have access to other worlds, other dimensions. But why does an artist have access to other worlds, other dimensions, other realities? Because he focuses on them at the same time that he focuses on reality here, the here and now of reality. An artist recreates what he sees from the inspiration of what he doesn't see. Michelangelo created magnificent works of art that 500 years ago made him famous. And what did he do, really? He focused on creating a sublime beauty, a physical perfection, an idealization of the human form. And he did that using the context of the religion that he was born into, that operated the society that he was part of. And so it had an impact on that society. And it continues to have an impact on us today. You know, said that Michelangelo waited until he saw the image in the stone and chiseled away that which was not the image and created the form in that way. But really it was more than that. It was more than allowing the image to come to him through the form, which I'm certain that he did. It was allowing himself to dissolve into insignificance and to allow the eternal nature, a grace and a beauty and a flow to move through him, to move him. And as he said himself, his hand was moved by the hand of God, which means his body itself was the temple of God and the consciousness of God inhabiting the creation and creating another image of the divine that could move through time and inspire us all. The magnificent David, the inebriated Bacchus, the majestic Bruges Madonna, and the baby Christ, the risen Christ with the cross, and the incomparable Pietà. And then you have his unfinished creations, Florentine Pietà. Indecisively made, but something that communicates powerfully as well, showing us that there are infinite possibilities within the fabric of creation. It could be this, or it could be this. And so in his incomplete Pietà, he carved himself as the face of Joseph, a self-portrait, putting himself, his idea of himself, his ego, into the place of a holy man, one whom God entrusted to father and raise the embodied child of God. So from that point of view, what did Michelangelo accomplish? In his creations, we have a celebration of the Christian ideals. We also have a celebration of the pagan ideals. We have an acknowledgement that divine nature is the truth of us all. The truth that would set us free if it were experienced and made real within our experience of ourselves. So how do we make that real? Well, we can open and receive if we take the time to do it. Take the time away from the telephone, the internet, every needless distraction, because what do you do? What do you do when you have a life to live and you don't know who you are and you don't know why you're here? Well, at a young age, Michelangelo decided who he was. He decided that he was the greatest artist that had ever lived, that he was better as a child than all of the masters that he apprenticed to and learned from. Every work that he studied, he said to himself, how could this be even better? And made it that way. Now, seemingly, he seemed to have worked his entire life diligently, and yet he only completed about 50 works of art. So it seems to me that he was doing many other things as well, because he really only dedicated himself to creating a few transcendent sculptures. He put the time into the David, the Moses, the Bacchus, the Pietà. And the rest, by and large, were unfinished works or minor works. But most people don't know he was a prolific letter writer, and he was a lover of life. And he was a poet, an architect, a sculptor, a painter, and he made himself available for community service, the defense of Florence, the operating the construction crews building St. Peter's, because he knew how to do it and it wasn't being done right. So he was a man that was intent on showing how something is done right. Diligent study. with the goal of absolute perfection in his youth. In his old age, he was seemingly content to point in the direction of perfection, tell more of a story with his unfinished creations, and truly, I guess he was probably the father of modern art. With his incomplete sculptures. The Sistine Chapel is a magnificent, nearly miraculous creation, with stories within stories, and there's so much of that is interesting and that can be learned from how he interacted with people. I'm not saying that he was a paragon of virtue. He wasn't. He was frustrated, and he was probably bisexual. You know, certainly exhibited homosexual traits, but he had quite a love for Victoria Colonna as well, his best friend for many years. And he took care of his family. He supported his father, he supported his brothers. And he complained about everything. And he was not interested in any type of social interactions. He wasn't interested in pretense. He wasn't interested in the court of public adulation that so captured Raphael and to some extent Leonardo da Vinci as well. He was here to leave his mark and to make a statement. And to me, that statement seems to be transcendent truths are real and can be embodied by humanity. And when they are, it's miraculous and magic. So how do we create that magic for ourselves? Now, Michelangelo was a mystic, and he knew what he knew, and he saw what he saw, and he did what he did. But he didn't, his creation was not the perfection of himself. It was the perfection of his art and his talent. But at the same time, I don't know that we've ever been able to fully know and understand from the writings about Michelangelo. But through direct perception of his art, we can know that the extraordinary was made real. That the impossible was achieved. And that humanity will be forever blessed for the life that he lived and the degree that it inspires us with the magnificence of his works. So what can we take from that? for ourselves, for our own lives, as a direction. There's billions of us. There was one Michelangelo. Does that mean that it's impossible for you to inspire others? It seems trite to say that each one of us has a transcendent gift, but we each do. If we look, if we notice, and if we open up and realize, make it real. Know what it is to know the truth that will set you free. And beauty and grace and a sublime experience of yourself will be the result. And what you do in your life, you'll do in such a way that it'll be a beautiful thing to observe. It'll be a transcendent experience for yourself. And it'll be an inspiration to everybody that observes you. And it doesn't matter what your profession is. It doesn't matter what your past is. It only matters that in the present, you're willing to be changed. You're willing to be moved by that which is irresistible when you encounter it. And what would that be? If there's a truth that is so brilliantly, beautifully sublime, that when you confront it and know it intimately, that your truth is realized through your exposure. Then that's what you're looking for. And where did Michelangelo look for it? Not to books, not to friends, not to family, not even to his church. But he looked direct to God, said, "Give me what I need to create what I have chosen to be and to make me able to deliver so magnificently that my life will have been worth living." And it was, and it is, and so can be yours. And it's not too late. For me, I turned 60 years old. And I could hardly be more unsettled and dissatisfied with the life that I've lived. Very little I can be proud of. And yet, whatever it is that you've done or haven't done, in your unrealized, unenlightened, unactualized experience of yourself, doesn't matter, because that's what you were being and you were consistent with who and what you experienced yourself to be, who and what you were told by others that you were. And regardless of what all of that is up until this very moment, none of it stops. The same thing is from happening to you as happened to Michelangelo. When he said God moved through him to create the magnificence that he created. Now, whatever it is that you're intent on creating, do like Michelangelo did. Decide what that is and sit and wait until God moves you so that your creation is a perfect one. Now that doesn't mean sit and be entertained by the world. It means to open to God and receive everything that God has for you. Now we'll have to take a moment and talk about God, because there's so many of us that are agnostic and
Hey, how much time?
an atheist. So how do we benefit from that concept of God when we don't believe in it and know that it can't possibly be true?